Thank you, everyone. This is the Contract Review Committee's Friday, October 18th, 2024 meeting, which will also include today a number of guests as we are going to do our first bidders information session as part of our agenda. So first I need to establish quorum. So of the Contract Review Committee, I am Veronica Golczyk, the chair, and Joanna Roach here. Okay, she's our vice chair. And up on the screen, we have Sue Minthinen.
Here.
All right, and John Balash.
Here.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have established quorum. Next thing is I need an approval of the agenda. Can I have a motion? So moved. All right. I have a second?
Second.
All right. Because we are doing a hybrid meeting, all of our votes have to be done by roll call. So Joanna? Aye. John?
Aye.
Sue?
Aye.
Myself, Veronica, aye. So we approve that. We now have some minutes from January 22nd, 24, September 9th, 24, and September 19th, 24. Do I have an approval of minutes? Move to approve the minutes. Thank you. Second?
Second.
All right. All right. So Joanna? Aye. Sue?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
And myself, aye. On to public comment, which typically is for something that is not on the agenda. We do have a number of people from the public that we will go through a brief introduction as we go on, but I do want to also just point out that we have two members here in person, and I don't think anyone up on the screen that are members of the the Council for Human Services. We've invited them to attend this meeting because Tara's here. Tara also?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay,
I'm
and
just
Tara
off
is up on
camera.
the screen.
Sorry.
Okay, you. So we have three members, actually 5 members, because Sue Minthinen is a member of the council and so am I. So I've invited them to attend because as you see, when we go on with our presentation, we have gone through a series of meetings, just in trying to align and get this process improved. We have had numerous years of well-functioning, and there's some history with contract review and Council for Human Services. Number of years, there was not a Council for Human Services that has been reinstituted the past few years. And I might as well start right now with our bidders information session because this will explain a little bit of where we are and why we are here today.
Just give me a second to check that it's being seen properly.
Okay. All the information that you will see on the screen today, plus any additional questions that come up will be put into frequently asked questions that will be available to all. Our goal here is to, on the high level, to make the process as complete as possible so we are able to award equitably, fairly, and to all the needs of the community. So over the last couple of years, just the Contract Review Committee in our process, and some of the people in this room have participated in that, we have called people in for interviews, primarily because we had gaps in the application. And so what we did is the committee went through all the questions that seemed to come up because the questions weren't necessarily just specific to one organization. We saw some threads, which meant that we needed to beef up and improve the application. So, the goal is to have a more robust application and to get information in. So this all went back to some background. I gave you a little bit of a background on the Contract Review Committee and Council for Human Services, but in this past year or so, the Select Board has been going through a planning process to determine goals and initiatives. So as is the Health and Vibrant Community Mission Statement included, improved government efficiency as an initiative. So what we were able to do is by piggybacking onto those two initiatives to basically stand back. We're able to hire Reftelis, which is a consulting firm. Many people probably in this room or on screen may have been contacted by them to be part of their interview process. And just a few weeks ago, they were able to come and give us an high-level overview of their findings. What that is going to do is, as with any consultant, they can get back with pages and pages of, you could do this, you could do that, but it's now up to us to customize it for our needs and ultimately to make this process smoother, more efficient, and make sure that we are reaching as much as we can in the community. So I'm going to use one of Jericho's sayings here that so things are changing, and this is not a stagnant process. We have to continue the process as we're making changes. So Jericho calls it that we're changing the tires on the bike as we're going down the road. So it really does say what we've been doing. So by us looking at all the questions of the past couple of years and trying to improve the application, what you see right now, next year may change. But we are trying to make those changes as we go along. So that is a little bit of a background of why we're here. And so we got, initial, samples of the grant application. What these are just some of the high level things. Now, before I even go on, committee members, please do jump in because we've had so many meetings and there's so much information, just trying to get as much as possible. And I know that I am missing points, so I invite committee members to jump in, and then also Jericho to fill in. And also, as members of the public, Council for Human Services, if you want to add anything into the process. So basically, you have all received the new grant application. This grant will be starting July 1st, so it's fiscal year 26, something that I've had to wrap my head around because we're in 24, we're talking 26 already. So this is fiscal year 26. We will, of course, be doing quarterly reports, as we have always done. The quarterly reports, the first one won't be due until October of 2025. As we get into this, quarterly reports have always been something that sometimes is a little bit puzzling, not getting adequate information, requires follow-up. So the format for the quarterly reports hopefully will improve. Just as an example, with a quarterly report, if your program is not set to start until December for one reason or another, your quarterly report gets submitted, but just not applicable, with a note that you're not asking for money, because the quarterly reports pay your money in arrears. So anything that's spent from July until the end of September, that's what you get reimbursed in that first quarter report. So if you haven't, your program hasn't gone in, it's just you submit it with not applicable, will not start until a certain date. So, yes.
And then on the town staff side, we're changing around how we do some of the record keeping, how we have the program and protocols for sending reminders out for quarterly reporting. We're looking into getting some online reporting forms that would let you guys just go to a web page and fill things out. The latter is in the early stages. I have to work things out with IT and finance for it first, but we're trying to make sure that we're doing a little better job of having a regular and repeatable cycle for each order so that you guys know what to expect. There are reminders going out well ahead of time, and that we make it easy for people to submit it when possible.
And most important, a quarterly report comes with a narrative and an invoice. Without the narrative, we really can't pay the invoice. So complete information coming in will just make it much more streamlined. All right. So what we just did, the narrative questions that we're depending on for the grant application. You know, I'm not going to necessarily read everything up here. That's just giving you a overview. And I do believe that this will be available to everyone, so you can have it. As I said, also, any questions today will get put in FAQs because we want everyone to have the same information. With regard to just the grant, well, CRC, CHS, part of the outgrowth of our Reftalis study was the last time that the town did a needs assessment goes back to 2010. I think if we go around the room and people up there, I think everyone can give you needs of this island. But we think that it's time that we need to do another needs assessment. And what is currently happening, we've put a request in to see if we could get funding to do a needs assessment by July of next year, because that needs assessment will then be applied to our next grant process. So we have started the ball rolling on that, but it's going to take, it takes money, et cetera. So hopefully, Jericho, do you have an update on that?
So yeah, we're looking to start the scoping process in the next couple of weeks. If it follows along the timeline and it did, securing the study for this, we should have a contract in place and be starting the discussion of logistics and like who and how to implement the study within a couple months. So we should have something around when we have our joint meeting with CHS in the spring. On these narrative question things, in the past several years, there have been administrative type questions like how you submit it, et cetera, et cetera. Right now, both the substance misuse grant and the human services grant application are on the town's health and human service webpage. They're in doc format. The first section is a sample grant agreement, as mentioned in the previous slide. All you have to do for the submission process is take the last 2 pages that have the narrative questions in there and an information sheet to fill out. Submit those to me filled out in Word format. You should be able to just type right in underneath that, format it the way you want to, send it to my email address and also to Alexandria's email address, which is on the same webpage for redundancy. We're collecting those at end of day on November 4th. The application requires a hard copy submission. You can send that in, but as long as the electronic file, and this is primarily for off-island submitters, if the off-island organizations or on-island organizations have their paper copies come in after the due date, we are not disqualifying you. As long as I have the electronic copy in doc format following the naming structure outlined in the application by 4 p.m. on that day.
Okay. As we said, the contract review committee goes through all of the applications and through a process of interviews, whether it is over the telephone, what we'll do is when we get all the applications in, the committee will be, the applications divided up among committee members, and they will do the deep dive. So if everyone reads them, of course, but if there's any questions, you may get a phone call or you may get a visit. We don't necessarily see the need to have everybody come in to have a one-on-one interview. I think what we've agreed upon is if it's a brand new program, brand new organization, we will want to do that just to get to know who you are, maybe a little bit more of what your needs, etc. But if it's someone who, you know, has applied before, well-known, you'll get a phone call, and we certainly don't want to preclude. If you want to come in, you certainly are welcome, but we are not going to, you know, have that as a requirement that we have to have every single one come in and go through questions. And hopefully the new application will be getting better information in, so we won't have to have all those one-on-one interviews. All right.
So this is where we just start going through.
Okay, so this is going into the questions at this point. So,
So at the end of the application are the narrative questions. These are the narrative questions with a little bit of explanation around what we're looking for, what kind of questions we had in the past. And the best way for you to answer these questions in a way that'll make it easy for the committee to determine the value of your program.
okay. And here you can see as a mission statement and organizational history, you know, for longtime applicants, we really want you to focus really on what specifically is happening in this process, in this application, which is maybe different previous years, significant changes from previous years. And then for, like I said, highlighting elements of organizational or staffing that relate to programs submitted in this grant. So, you know, what happens when you say like an organizational history and mission statement, some of our larger organizations that have been around, that's wonderful, but specifically focus more on what the program that you're applying for. So it'll go more deep into that area. All right.
Next. Yeah.
Okay. So the next question has to do with program timeline. And, you know, this is where I had said before with quarterly reports, we do have some programs that don't just start on July 1st. They may go on a school cycle, or it could be seasonal variations or whatever. So specifically the timeline. And here, once again, you have the question, but it's going to be a narrative box. So, but these give you an idea of the things to make sure that you're including in there. Some of this is pretty, it's common sense, but we went through and just put some of these things of, well, you know, what would you do? New programs, detailed timelines for development of program, any milestones used in progress. So just pretty self-explanatory here. All right.
Additionally, the town has a behavioral health and human services calendar that you can use to implement events. We're going to try and tie that in with any regular events for that, so that we have a way for you guys to publicize and us to look at and organize what events are available.
You have that too, right, Sonny?
Well, it's your
It's
website,
ours,
right?
yeah.
Nantucket Cares,
Yeah, at CARES, yeah.
that cares.
And then I think I was talking to them about, well, never mind, sorry.
Okay. So program description, you know, what will this grant do? So be very specific in here. You know, how will it, services, education, outreach will be performed, who will perform the tasks, the logistics, just basically what are you applying for with this grant? So what will this program do? I'm gonna back up a little bit here, and I'm looking at Joanna for maybe some help on this because we recognize that the human services grant and the substance misuse grants have a couple of different purposes. Many of them are program grants, so specifically to run a program that's very well defined. We also have applicants that are looking more for organizational support. These are some of the things that I think as we go down the road, we're gonna implement maybe more structure into this because not everyone applies for a specific, and I'm just gonna pick, a thing like an after-school snack program. It may be that they need overall funding to implement their entire program. So it's, when we go through these applications, we really are looking at apples and oranges. It's not all apples. And so I think as down the road, we will get a little bit more specific in how we implement this. When you get your grant contract, what's really important to look in that contract in the beginning of it is really the definition of what we are funding. And that is being taken off of your applications. So it's really important that if you are asking for money for to paint the walls in a facility, and that's what you're telling you're gonna use the money for, we will have that on the application. If you decide you're not gonna paint the walls, but you need a roof instead, that's not what we're giving you the money for. So, when you get your contracts, important to read that to make sure that you understand and that we've had that understanding. So,
So essentially, these are restricted grants. And we're gonna move as we sort of develop the terminology better, as we move into the spring, we're gonna have very specific grant categories. Like operational support, restricted grants, capital requests, capacity building requests, program requests. Because what we know has happened in the past is that we've given money and then the invoice and report comes and it's not for exactly what was asked for, and then we're in a tough spot. So because the reporting requirements are gonna be more stringent, the definitions of the grants that we're asking you to complete are gonna be more strict. And we actually think that that will help you in the way that you are positioning the kind of money that you're looking for, right?
the history of the human services grant, basically, the town recognizes and through our tax dollars that we need to support all of the not-for-profits on the island for the many needs that we have. We want to encourage new programming and new things because things change, 10 years ago, maybe there wasn't a warming place, all right? We now know that that's an important part of our community. Maybe there's programs and ideas out there that we haven't even thought of yet. We want to encourage those, but we also recognize that we need to be able to support the ongoing also. So in order to be equitable and fair, moving toward that kind of structure will help us. So we're not quite there right now, but we are looking through it also through those lenses. So just so you're aware.
And then the end goal would be to have not exactly funds, but we would differentiate the money in the human services grant pot into specific use cases as outlined before. And then we would also try and have, ideally we'd be working with partnerships for other philanthropic organizations so that we can try and find optimal ways to fund programming that doesn't fit into our template.
Yeah.
And Sonny and I spoke yesterday, and we are going to work together on the definition of those categories.
Yes,
So that we can more closely align our ability to support programs that where we have overlap. So we think that that'll be helpful for the community and also for all the organizations on this call, so that everyone's speaking the same language.
exactly. You know, so as we go on in the application, you're also gonna see, well, let me hold that because. No, I was gonna jump ahead to,
Yeah.
you know, who is providing funding and if you've applied for other grants, et cetera, because we recognize we're not the only game in town and we're not meant to be the only game in town. We need to have more coordination with Community Foundation and there's other funders on the island also. So many of you, not just come to us, but go to other organizations. So we need to see a big picture. And if we haven't coordinated on our end, that's why we're asking for information. Who have you applied for? What have you received? Because unfortunately, our ask in grant applications far exceeds the money that we have. The only way that we're gonna be getting more money is basically by what we are doing, by making changes, tightening just the application, the whole process, because and also the needs assessment, because we all know that there's so much need out there, but at the end of the day, the money isn't unlimited. So we have to make sure that we're all putting money where it's best used.
And I think it's worth reiterating the point. The reason why we're modifying this process, the reason why we engaged a contractor is because we intend to request more money to cover a broader range of needs. And we're doing our due diligence to make sure we do that in the right way. That is the end goal here, is to have more total human service funding. And we're just trying to make sure the way that we spend it is the most effective and defensible way to do so.
All right.
We're on intended.
So the intended audience, all right, you know, we're gonna ask existing programs, you know, to go back and give us information on how many people were served the year before. This will also be how many people are being served going forth. You know, basically just to give us a better idea, specific terms of the expected number and the target demographics. I believe in the past, we may have said, you know, what percentage of the community are you serving? And that's a really hard thing because, and I don't mean to use the warming place, but it's a very specific, you know, thing, you know, we know that there are many people out there that need those services, but it's not
A large percentage.
it's not a large percent. The need is great, but it's not a large percentage. And that program needs to be funded just as a program that we may reach, you know, 50% of our population. So being able to balance and judge and giving, you know, equitable, you know, distribution. So that's why we're asking some very specific things on your target audience. All right, the next is the data table, and this is probably one of the things that if I were just looking at this, this would be like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do with all these numbers? But this is something that will help us be able to line up grants. So we're asking the same questions of everybody, and it basically is organizational data and program data. So it's a summary of information. This is not the complete financials that we will be asking later on, but this just gives us a snapshot. And here, if you look down on the organizational, all grants received in 25 and 24. And
So basically what happened for us in our operational analysis of what's been happening for the last couple of years is we were asking everybody individually these same questions. So essentially we formalized it into a table And it was the same thing with the percentage of and number of people served. We were asking everyone those questions anyway.
Right.
And we've kind of learned along the way that we have to equalize it. And because, as Veronica said, what some person's percentage might be smaller than somebody else, but the impact might be greater. And so if we start to collect the information in the exact same way, then we can start to deploy the resources
Yeah.
in hopefully the best way possible.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
For the definition of operating budget, is that what you spent in that year on everything?
Yes.
Okay.
It's basically a scale for your organization in terms of monetary output.
May I also ask a question?
Yes, just identify yourself, please.
Morgan Baker from Fairwinds.
Okay, thank you.
For all the grants received, we were just touching on the importance of understanding where other grant funding comes. For this section, it looks like the space is the dollar amount. Is there another area within the application where we can specify, specifically, the Nantucket grants or other grants funding so that you can see those restrictions as well? Is that
So
something that the committee would like to see?
That's an excellent question. The last page has a detailed budget question where you would be doing like line item for your program. You can either embed it into the Word document there, or you can send it along as an attachment and I'll figure out how to get it in there.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Okay. Any questions on this? It's basically, you're gonna be picking up numbers that appear later on, but just filling it in, so we'll have that comparison that will help.
Can I just ask one question?
Mhm.
Is there any information asked about like how much you get from fundraisers and what you're using that funding for?
Well, that should be right, that should directly be on your financials.
Okay.
Right, so there should be a whether it's events, like a net events
Yeah.
number, or whether that's divided into some categories, that should be on your financials.
Okay.
Mhm.
Which would be in that last detailed
Yeah.
budget section.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Let me now cover up the question.
So needs served. And this is what we're just, how large, is the need address being impacted? And how did you determine that number? What methods did you use? So, here, you all know your populations that you work with. So you're gonna take some information from information you have. Once again, when we go back to getting our needs assessment done, you'll be able to pull information from there. But for right now, this is gonna come from your understanding of your population and working with this. All right.
And a big part of this is is an evidence-based assessment of need and evidence-based assessment of risk, which is why you'll see method italicized or measure italicized in a lot of these. There is a large push towards evidence-based determination of need and impact. We're trying to follow along with that just to anticipate the questions that'll come when we're trying to justify our recommendations.
Right, and that goes into the next thing with program goals, because one thing that we're gonna be asking for is how do you measure success or failure of your program? And that could be done in numerous ways. We have people that are doing surveys, pre and post surveys of their clients, and I'll use clients just roughly. So pre and post, and there's other metrics that you may use in your own, so we don't want to dictate what that is because it has to be specific for your program. But, at the end of the day, what happens is the way we're structured right now, contract review committee reviews, we make our recommendations. We will be working hand in hand with the Council for Human Services and sharing that information with them. But then we, as contract review, Council for Human Services, has to basically go to the finance committee to give an explanation of these are the folks that applies, this is why, and that ultimately goes to the select board. So at the end of the day, the question always comes, well, we gave X amount of dollars, what benefit did we get from that? So, the measures, would be specific. We're not gonna tell you how to do it, but we are gonna be looking for some form of a measurement of the effectiveness of the program. Mhm. Partnerships and collaboration. Um, I'm just smiling at this because over the past few years, we've had lots of discussions on this. Well, we can't expect people to collaborate. Well, you know what? We're a small island. You know, the only way that we survive here is by the generosity of our community and that collaboration. And you have all shown us that it is possible. So, it's not just for our grant process, but if you are applying for grants off island or even within a, people are gonna be asking, you know, how do you collaborate? So it's, you have all shown us that it is definitely possible. So thank you.
And then, on this, another part of collaboration is town staff collaborating with the nonprofits and town collaborating with other grant funding organizations. So it's just gonna be a two-way street. It's not just gonna be nonprofits collaborating amongst each others. It's also gonna be increased collaboration by the granting agencies and the various like partnerships that we can do to make this work better. And then specifically the collaboration definition, we have in a rubric, there's a specific objective measure of collaboration, and it's whether or not you have a formal relationship. And then we just want to know what the nature of that relationship is. Is it a referral-based relationship? Are you guys sharing resources? Do you have, you know, a agreement, like a hiring agreement with other agencies to pass around resumes, that sort of thing?
Mhm. Okay, so now some nitty-gritty, just the grant amount. How much of this program is going to be funded by the CRC grant? Any other revenue being applied? If not granted the full amount, will the program happen? We get that an awful lot, that if you've come and asked for $500,000 and we don't have that, we can only give a portion of that. Can you implement the program? And what are your plans to implement that program? And this also leads to a sustainability question, because what we would love to see, and it's not what we would like to see, let's put it that way, is that we can provide funding as, say, a startup. And, you know, these may be some changes coming down the road. We can do funding for a number of years, but in that time, you need to be looking at other places to also get money, because if we don't have an unlimited amount, we have a limited amount of money, we want to encourage new programs. Programs should be looking at where else can they get financial support. So whether it's through fundraising, other grant applications, bake sales, whatever. So that is what we're trying to get at with this also. So it's a, we're trying to make this, to make sure that everybody gets what they need. And also, we want to encourage new programming too, so.
It's like Nantucket Shark Tank.
Yes. Except that we don't have a Mark Cuban that has endless pockets.
Would that we did.
We wish we did. And you know, it's interesting, you know, I could get on a soapbox here because we know our need is great or whatever, but you know, you just pick up the Inky or look at anything, you know that our needs are great in every single area. So I, of course, where my heart is, unless you have a healthy community, meaning positive mental health, physical health, shelter, food, et cetera, you don't have a community. So, but we also know that we have many needs on this island, from coastal resiliency to going on and on and on, so,
That's a question. As a new organization, we haven't, like you say, we don't have our big donors in place yet, and we're working hard on that this year. It's very hard to know how much to ask for. Because we have in our mind, this is a critical year for us until we do get, know what our donors are gonna be. And it's just always hard, I sit there and go, and Sunny knows this too. Do I ask for a lot and hope to get a piece of it, or is there a percentage, or how would you suggest I put a number down?
I would say that you ask for what you need.
I was gonna say
And-
the exact same thing.
You ask for what you need,
Yeah,
and you need to justify what you're asking for. We can't necessarily say we're gonna be able to fund all, but that's why that question is, if you've asked for 100,000 and we can only give you 50. Can you still run this program? How would you have to adjust it? And there's all different, as I'm looking around and up on the screen, there's so many different, there's not one size fits all. But ask for what you need with justification for it. And we will try to, except for, like
All of it.
all of it, we'll try to do our
How much
best.
are you requesting? How much do you have?
okay.
Yeah, I do think that's an important thing to talk about, because in the past, when we were discussing increasing funding for the CRC funds grants, we were mentioning that on a given year, we would have $650,000 and $1.2 million in requests against it. And we were saying that was evidence for an increase in needs, and we should increase funding, maybe not to match that, but to cover that sort of level of expenditures. And the response was that if you're basing need off of request, that incentivizes everyone to increase the size of their request. And as a result, we really want, how much do you think it's gonna cost for you to deliver that service? And I know, having had to deal with this sort of thing a couple times recently, if you have a program that you are expecting, that you plan out for X amount of dollars and you get half X, you have to substantially engineer your program. We're looking at some process things in the future to make that less of a concern, possibly pre-allocating amounts. So you're applying for a set amount of money. But that has its own set of difficulties around how do you partition the money, et cetera, et cetera. So request what you think it needs, and then show us how it costs that much. Because that makes it much easier for us to go to other people and be like, this is why we need to increase needs. Because service delivery on Nantucket is 3 to 5 times more expensive than it is anywhere else in the Commonwealth, at least, if not the country.
Right. That Nantucket factor is major, we see it in everything that we do, so. The rubric,
Yeah, it's a rubric.
rubric is just a grading, evaluating tool that we use. It's just one of the components that we look, at using, and as the grant improves, the rubric improves. The rubric is just basically going back to the questions that we asked and see how you've fallen into, the spectrum.
Oh, also worth noting, the rubric is not the sole determinant.
Right.
And the intent is to have it changed to reflect needs as we determine them. So it'll look substantially different after the needs assessment is completed. It'll be tweaked on an ongoing basis, depending upon what the CHS and the CRC think the priorities are for a given year. And it's one of the ways that we can kind of have feedback over what kind of grants and how we weight them.
This information will be available to you. You'll look on the website, you'll find, any frequently asked questions. We'll put those on there also. Jericho will be holding some, office hours specifically if people have questions. Please do contact him. I will be probably sitting in on some of those with him also. So our goal here is to meet the needs of our community. And to make sure that we're addressing those. And as we said, down the road, you'll see something different. But I think it's just gonna be evolving. And I wanted to thank the Contract Review Committee. I've sat on it now 2.5 years, and the work that has been done over the years, it's been yeoman's work, and we build on the shoulders of the people who come before us. And I appreciate supportive committee. I appreciate the Contract Review Committee and the Council for Human Services. We will be working more closely together in developing the roles of each. So, thank you.
I have one more question.
No, please do.
This is the endless question, person. When you ask for the program budget, is that for the total year, or do you want to see that by month?
Ideally, this is, I think, depends on the interest of like, what do you guys prefer?
So I'm thinking of you because you are seasonal to a certain extent, so your numbers. If you broke it out over a 12-month period, you're gonna have very close to zero, maybe in some months, and then it spikes. I think a year, but
I think most people do their budgets over 12 months.
But you do.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
okay.
I have a couple of questions.
Yeah, I think maybe we should go to just the general Q&A session.
Yep.
Is that where we're at?
Yeah,
I just,
yeah.
that's we're like saying
Sorry.
goodbye and I'm like,
No,
I'm not ready to say goodbye.
No, I was saying thank you. Now the questions.
Okay, so if my organization, let's say, for example, has multiple programs that I'm looking for funding for, do I bundle them into one application? Or apply separately for each program?
So in the past, resembles the Fairwinds, how they break in the translation services, sliding fee scale. So traditionally, what we have done is there would be a single application, you separate out multiple programs, and then when I do the finalized version of your grant agreement, we'll pull out the different categories, and depending upon how the application is formatted, the dollar values for each program.
Right, so the budget requested for this program is in one application?
Yes.
Okay.
One application.
Okay. Second part of that question is if another organization is applying for grant with me as a collaborator, is that acceptable? Are we allowed to do that? Like I can be on multiple applications if I'm like just heading, like I'm the lead on one
But
application.
there needs to be a lead, you're a collaborative, then you'll be on that other application.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Key component of the legal relationship or the financial relationship there is the town and the 501c that signs the grant agreement. Past that, you guys are free to arrange your collaboration in whatever way is necessary.
Okay. Amazing. Okay, and then my last question is, if you're looking to encourage new program, is applications for existing or previously funded programming discouraged? Okay.
I think when we have had a chance to see how this cycle has gone and determine how FY 27 is going to go, then we'll be looking at specifically breaking out portions of that funding for new programs. And that might be something where we look to partner with another fiscal agent who could provide money that, because Massachusetts state procurement law limits the way in which money that we can only ever reimburse if it's coming from the town for a startup or new program. That's not ideal. So if we could find other partners to help us with that portion of it, then that would be really helpful for us too. So.
Thank you.
Good. Questions, 4 questions. Anyone up on the screen?
I have a question, Veronica.
Okay.
And it might be more for, I don't know, Jericho might need to address this too. So the needs assessment that you're talking about, the town doing,
for next year? Can you talk more about that?
So the major, once the HHS report is formally adopted, once the study performed by Raftellus is formally adopted by the select board, I will publish it on there and it will go into greater depth on how this was determined. But basically, the key insight that they said that was making it difficult for them to evaluate the effectiveness of our grant system was that we don't have hard data from the last decade on what the needs are and how they're met. So the idea here is that we will have, in the current application, there are references to the old needs assessment in terms of level 1 and level 2. There's a specific terminology that's deployed there. What we need in the needs assessment is we need a new set of problems, a new identification of what's going on. And then we will directly tie that to the initiatives happening through CRC. So if this needs assessment is performed, it will then kind of give us a rank of priorities on that. Most likely, we're drafting the scope for the project right now, and then we'll start looking for contractors. But the idea is to do an island-wide version of the behavioral health assessment that was done.
The
through
GPS one,
but
like
mu-
3 years ago.
Yeah, so like, so that gave us a shared terminology across what the problems were. It gave us a network map of who the actors were in it. It let us rank problems by priority, and it let us see most specifically where we could make small changes and have a big impact on the system as a whole. The system enablers is the term that they used in that. What we're hoping for from this is that we get a similar, although I would prefer a little more quantified in terms of the assessment. A lot of the GPS was qualitative due to the lack of data. But we do this human services wide. It then becomes sort of the binder that has the terms that we're using to discuss things. We'll formally define which types of grants we're doing and how we're going to address those. And then we'll have a kind of working document to go with. The data collection itself, we're looking to partner with an outside third-party contractor. And then we would be funding them to perform this, and then doing as much back-end work as we can to facilitate them doing the investigation itself, connect them to existing partners. I am not an expert in that, which is why I'm going to hire experts in that, and then I'm going to look at what their proposal is and follow from that. I don't want to speculate too much on exactly how that's going to look, because I haven't done it before. The GPS one, I participated towards the end. It had already been initiated beforehand. I wasn't involved in the scoping of it. But what I'd like to do in this particular instance is, we just do a broad, wide survey. We get shared terminology, get some values around what we need to change and what needs to be fixed. And then we build that into, so for example, the previous question had what need is served. Once we have a needs assessment, that need will be, which of these things identified by the needs assessment are you addressing with this program? And then we can, at a town or community-wide level, find the markers for that particular problem, the metrics by which we can measure it, and we can see if our efforts are having an impact over time. And if they aren't, we can redirect it. And if they are, we can then increase funding for that particular thing.
So I think you said the last one, the most recent one was 2010.
Yeah.
What's the usual schedule for the towns?
There is,
Needs assessment? Oh,
so part of the recommendation was a regular and ongoing
okay.
needs assessment, with a timetable of 3 to 5 years
Okay.
per iteration. I'm gonna try and figure out, as currently set up, we are funded for that to do the next needs assessment. And I'm trying to figure out a way to kind of build into the budgetary system that needs assessment, so it doesn't get left behind like the previous one.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm thinking, I'm looking up at John Balash because at a meeting we were in recently, he actually hit it right on the head that our needs have changed. Since 2010, the demographics of our island is much different. And even though we may still have the same top categories of reaching our different subsets of our community, really needs to be, I believe, a bigger focus. And John was very eloquent. I don't know if you remember, but at our meeting with Raftellus, he was quite eloquent in how he explained that. So, and I'm thinking, even when we did our youth behavioral health grants last year, we recognized that our I'm sorry, stuck on human
I'm not
resources
taking
today.
it personally, don't.
I'm taking personal, and Human Services Grants has mostly focused on adult programming.
Mhm.
And we were missing the young folks. So, that's why we're encouraging everyone to be applying for this, because there were some spectacular new programs that came to light that, so we know that there's great stuff happening on this island and more that needs to be done, and it's all because of people on the screen and here and out there, that put blood, sweat, and tears into making this the best place to live in the world.
Can I ask a question about needs assessments? I know the hospital has to do one every 3 to 5 years. Is there a way to also incorporate their data? And it's all social determinants of health that they've
So,
measured. And the other thing I want to put a pin in is the COVID crisis, where we had so much federal and state support. If we're doing a look back to 3 to 5 years, that data is going to be captured in a needs assessment, which is going to skew things.
I think that's one of the reasons why they recommended an ongoing one. To the hospital's needs survey, to my understanding of its conception, it's aimed primarily at social determinants of health as
Mhm.
opposed to a broader human service
Mhm.
view. We'd absolutely be hoping to piggyback on any of the networking connections and data that they've collected. My guess is that's going to be most helpful in the initial designing of the needs survey to see what's covered and make sure that we don't need to duplicate work across those two studies.
Yeah.
Do you have a copy of it?
It's not out yet,
It's
but it
not
will be.
Soon?
Yeah, next couple weeks.
Yeah,
No,
that
I
was
would think
just
it would
done,
be a
right?
good thing
Yeah.
to share with the.
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll shout it from the mountaintops when it's out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we
And
know
then
if
I
that
know,
needs- Do we know
Oh,
if that
sorry.
needs assessment's gonna be in other languages than English?
anyone we do at the town absolutely will.
Okay,
Um,
great. Thank
Yeah.
you.
That's another kind of firm commitment for this organization is to be as multilingual and culturally agile as we can. And I think that that's an important thing because that's where I think a lot of the unmet need is where people who do not have a positive relationship with local government. And that's one of the reasons why we're trying to make this a more transparent and efficient process as well.
Can I say a couple things about the financial piece of this? There's two things I just wanted to make a point of saying. In the budgets that you guys submit, it should not be that you list a grant from this organization in your operating budget. Because you haven't gotten it. And we've run into that a few times. So like it would not serve you to do that. Avoid it. And I think the second thing is if you are asking us for money that includes money to hire people for programs, you will have to show us that you were able to successfully hire those people before. Because that's another trap that we have fallen into. Give us the money, we'll execute this program, but we have to hire these people. And then when the quarterly reports come back in, you weren't able to hire the people, all understandably, right? Like this is not, it's not a criticism from that place. It's a matter of, it's difficult to justify continuing to support that financially when you could give the money to something else that's more easily executed. So I think those are just two things to pay attention to in the process.
Yeah, and it is difficult if you are asking a program that we need to hire X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Be realistic and
Right.
are you gonna be able to hire those? Because it's not
otherwise-
fair to the entire process because
Yeah.
it allocates money going that could have been for another program. So it's not an easy job that you guys have to do. I understand. But we're trying to be fair and equitable.
And just one other thing related to that, which is that this body deliberates on grant applications, provides a recommendation to FinCom, which then puts it into Article 9 in the town meeting. You are not guaranteed assent until after that town meeting approves that budget article. And then after the final agreements are signed at the beginning of the fiscal year. So in the past couple of years, we have not announced the outcome of the recommendations from our deliberations until it has gone through and been approved at town meeting. And there's been some confusion about that, and we can do a better job of communicating that out effectively. But the important thing is that the binding document that will determine the nature of your grant is released after this process is done. It's not the one at the beginning of the application. That is just a sample. And then we'll also be trying to post the awards and more information about the process as we go along in partnership with the town comms department, and make sure that it is out on social media once the award has been done, and then also have a place for people to check. That's one of the things I want to use Act Cares for, is to have that be where all of the town grant material goes.
Well, one of the things that we could do is, once we have our final recommendation before it goes to the FinCom, is we can release what our recommendations are. Because then people will know.
Right, but it's a recommendation.
Yes.
Until it actually
Until it goes
passes
through.
town meeting.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's extremely rare, but it's possible that something can change at town meeting, but, always. Right. Hand up, John?
Yeah, this is kind of a little bit of history, because many of you will not know this, and it actually happened before I got onto the committee. But part of the reason that the contract review committee was created was that they used to go to the town meeting, and there were a couple of, in those days, much different, what should I say, the whole landscape of who was asking for money was quite different. But somebody would come up and challenge the amount and say, this organization should have gotten twice as much as it got, and then would have to go to a vote at the town meeting, up or down. And that became an impossible situation from the then Human Services Committee to deal with. And that was when there was the Contract Review Committee was created, and it's the reason it's constituted in the way it is now, which has people at large, people from the Human Services Committee on it. A member of the Finance Committee is a designated member, and there used to be a designated member of the Board of Selectmen, but there's a humorous history as to why that is no longer part of it, but is not useful for right now. But just to kind of give you, some of you who are not used to or wonder why we have this situation, this short review might be just interesting, and it's certainly something that anybody can go back and look at the history. It is, I think you can find it somewhere, but I don't think that's necessary. But it does sort of give you a background of where we're at, why we're at, and now we are again evolving into a much better, more organized and more, what should I say, deep-reaching and thoughtful way of approaching the whole question of how the town money is asked for and awarded.
Mhm. Thank you, John. That's, it's important for us to know the history. And it sounds like it was the Wild West back in those days. And I can imagine, it was.
Vote to secede the Union, or secede from the United States, that got pretty far along in the process.
Well, I talk about going back to America when we go to the mainland.
That was the general
yeah.
thought at the time.
But thank you, John. That's an important history to know. So. Anything else?
I am gonna look that history up, the county trying to secede from the nation.
There was,
Winter is
That is
long,
true.
so yes.
Yes, exactly.
It wasn't that long ago.
no, it was like the late 70s.
Yeah.
And I think there was also, it came about because there was an attempt to secede from Massachusetts and rejoin New York. That did not go. And then the frustration was.
You have your winter project. Yeah, make it short.
My interest on
John.
that one, but
Thanks
thank
for that
you.
tip.
Thank you.
There's some
All right.
absolutely fascinating history from that time period in town meeting.
Uh, All right, with, any more questions, comments, et cetera? You know?
I'm just curious, was this emailed out to everyone? Like, I think about all the wonderful organizations that applied for the youth behavioral.
Everyone who said, who we have an email for that has applied in the last 5 years has gotten sent
Okay.
out to.
It's good to know.
Then we're also doing, we did press releases, we're also doing some promotion through the comms department, through the Healthy Collaborative mailing list, and basically anywhere else we can get it out there.
All right.
Awesome.
And there still is another 2.5 weeks or whatever to get the grant applications going. So if you know of people who are not here and could benefit, please do spread the word. I appreciate that.
And the documents themselves for the substance misuse grant and for the human services grant can be found on the Health and Human Services webpage. If you Google Health and Human Services, or actually if you Google Human Services Nantucket, it'll take you there. They're in a big box. We'll have the slide deck from this and the draft report, it's adopted report from Raftellus when we get that. We'll also be trying to post as much stuff there and on Act Cares as we can.
All right, so without any other questions, we can close the bidders information session. And just continue on with our agenda. It's gonna be quick, you know, we've got some other business. And if you need to leave, please do.
Thank you.
All right, and thank you very much for all attending. And again, you'll find this up on
The human services page from Town of Nantucket.
town, and then also frequently asked questions or whatever, and we will have some
And
office hours also.
office hours will be available. You can call me. My number is on the Human Services webpage. You can email me at any time. And then if there's anything that pops up, feel free to ask me. Whatever I get for questions will be collected and thrown together and chucked on that webpage, just so that we all, if there's something new that happens or some new change, everyone can look at it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Good,
you.
Thank you. Thank you. Alrighty.
Thank you. Thanks for having us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Alrighty. So going on to other business, I know Sue has a hard stop in 5 more minutes.
All right.
So I think this should be relatively quick.
Yeah,
Any other business?
none.
At this point?
I thought that was great.
Good.
Yeah, that
I
worked.
think that was really good. I think everybody has the information. I think we made our points.
Right.
I
And
think we need to do that. This is something that needs to be done every year,
Yep, yes.
without a doubt. And I think we'll tie it to the letters of intent, and that'll address
Yep.
specific, can we do this or not questions.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, it's definitely gonna have to happen next year, just because we're throwing the whole thing on its head.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think this should be what we do every year. This should be.
I
part of
agree.
the-
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
agree, but I know next year we might
Be
even have
more
to hold like
important
2
next year.
separate ones.
More important,
Yeah,
without a doubt.
next.
So our next meeting will be on the 8th. So the applications come in on the 4th. On the 8th, what we will do is divide them up amongst committee members. Everyone will, of course, review all the applications, but then we will have each person dive deep into their own individual set. As we said, you know, I'm hoping that we don't have to have as many interviews in person. If someone wants to, that certainly is fine, but new programs, yes, but by us going out, talking, getting those questions, bringing them back. Hopefully it'll work quickly.
Very quick question while I have everybody. If somebody asks, if somebody's talking about the presentation portion, just so that I can communicate out properly in the office hours, new organizations, yes. Anyone who requests,
Right,
yes. Okay, that's fine.
right. That's about it. All right. And that'll be 9 o'clock on the 8th, and we'll be here, so Zoom or in person. And you will make all the grants available digitally, but then also if someone wants a hard copy.
So,
Well, I know two people who will want a hard copy.
yeah, I can.
Me
have-
and John.
Right.
And me, I like a
actually-
hard
and
copy.
Actually, I like the hard copy too, because my printer at home like will choke.
So
if I
I'm
do
gonna, so what I'm gonna do is I will collate all the applications into a packet as we've done in past years. I will then make available for printing all of them. So just come in and grab one from me. In previous years, I printed one for everybody and then I had 85 pounds of paper building up.
Yeah,
So
we don't want that.
just when you guys need them, come in and I'll print them out for you.
So let me ask
Okay.
you, so we can get them before the 8th?
I will
or-
have them collated. I should have.
Or
so-
can we just get them on the 8th? Or do I need them before then?
I don't think you'll need them before them. I think we usually do a brief run through. I
And
want to
if
get
you
them.
give, not a tally sheet,
Yeah.
give us
the-
just a
the
sheet
Sheet as we call it.
before the 8th, if we can have that, so we could have it, so we could see how many came in.
You will have
Just
the
for
cheat-
organization.
The cheat sheet and the electronic packet before the 8th. If you want during that meeting, we can run and print them out, or you can tell me who's gonna come in person and print them out.
Okay, what I'd also like to ask, Lexi to do. I know that we got this sheet last year that was
Oh,
from
the
the beginning of
historical
time
sheet?
or whatever, and there were inaccuracies on it or whatever. I think what I would like to see is maybe the last, 3 years. Just the tally sheet of what people applied for, what they got over the last 3 years, so we can have that
Yeah.
as.
I'll have that. That's available.
Right.
That's available at all times and I can just subdivide it out however you
Okay.
guys need it.
All right.
The other thing is if there's information like that you guys want ahead of a meeting, let me know and then it'd be easier for me to prepare it rather than pulling it up. Other than that, sure. We should go though. I know Sue has to go and I know that we'll be no more hanging meetings.
Very good. All righty. So, motion
I
to
make a motion
adjourn?
to adjourn.
Chomping
Second.
at the bit. And John
John
second.
seconded.
Thank you all. This
Roll
has
call.
been a fabulous process, and I think that we're just making improvements on what's been done in the past.
We're on the right track.
We're on the right track, so, Sue,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Joanna,
Aye.
and Veronica, I thank you very much.
Thank you.
And happy Halloween, and we'll see you after Election Day.
Oh,
So-
don't forget to vote.
Vote, 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 vote.